Okay, hi everyone. My name is Rachel Case, and I just wanted to share with you guys today a little bit about what God has done for me in my life. Um, I'm a recovering addict. My drug of choice was heroin, and I've been on it since I was 14. And I started using drugs at the age of 12, originally given to me by my mother. My first drug was cocaine and marijuana, and I just kept experimenting and found out I liked opiates better and eventually found heroin. First time I stuck a needle in my arm, I had been abused pretty badly by my first love, and I was 16, I believe, and I remember it was the 4th of July, and I just didn't want to feel anymore, and it worked for a while. I started getting really sick of my addiction, probably around the age of 18. But I started stripping with my mother, and prostituting, and the drugs were the only thing that made me be able to do that. So I continued on. I spiraled down for quite a few years. I was 24, 23 or 24, and I met a guy online, and I was with someone at the time, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. He was my dealer, and all I did was stay high in my bedroom all the time. Didn't really take care of my daughter. At this point, she was 3, and I got a hold of this man, and all of his posts were about recovery and God, and I wanted what he had, and I never knew that people like me made it out of addiction. So we started talking, and he told me about the rooms of AA and told me about God and what he had done for him. So the next day I moved out of where I was at, and I tried to get into sobriety. I had several failed attempts. I was not ready. I was not listening. I was scared to feel. Every time things from my past came up in sobriety that I just didn't want to deal with, I went back out and relapsed. I've been a chronic relapser for 4 years now, and I've never pieced together very many lengths of sobriety. The longest length I got was almost a year. I lost my children because I OD'd in the car and they were in the back seat, and I wanted them back. So I went to classes, like drug classes and all that good stuff, and went to counseling and jumped through all the hoops that CPS wanted me to jump through, and I eventually got my kids back. They were back in my home within 6 months, and after a year, my case was closed. At this time, I had been diagnosed with endometriosis, and I started getting prescribed pain pills. And at first, I was doing really good, let my sponsor hold them, and just getting what I needed for the day, taking them as prescribed. And then after about a week, I was like, oh, well, I can take some for a couple days so you don't have to come every day. And I started snorting them, and I was taking what I was supposed to take all day within a matter of hours. And, I quickly spiraled back out of control. I didn't do the sobriety for me. I did it to get my kids back because I was miserable without them. So, I was with their dad, very abusive. He was using also, his drug of choice was methamphetamine, and he would get crazy. And my kids were just in an environment they shouldn't have been in. They watched their mom get hit several times. We were both using, and it just wasn't a happy home at all. I had prayed quite a few times, and I always went back to the same stuff, God, get me out of this one and I'll be done forever. And of course he would, and I didn't quit. When I was pregnant with my son, which is now, he'll be 3 in May, I had a really high risk pregnancy with him. I had a lot of difficulties. And so I would go to the library and get DVDs because I'm not a reader. Well, I wasn't. And so I go and get some DVDs one day, and there's this book on the shelf, and it was called Dancing for the Devil. And it was like there was a light on this book. Something told me to read this book, which is a miracle in itself that I even read it, because at that time, no, I didn't pick up a book. So I pick up this book, and I look on the back of it, and it says, One Stripper's Journey from the Pole to the Pulpit. And I'm like, no way. People, I guess, don't do things like that. Yeah, people might get sober, but I mean, they don't get on the pulpit and talk about God. I mean, we're evil, wicked people that sold our bodies for money. I mean, it was just amazing to me that someone had done that. So I read this book, and the lady that wrote it had started this wonderful organization called Eve's Angels, and she would go to strip clubs, and she would just sit and wait for girls to approach her and start telling them there was a way out and that God loved them. And it started with that, and she now has a safe home for women that are in sex trafficking rings or prostitution, or women that have been part of that life that want out. And so I spiral out of control even more. I end up realizing, after my kid's dad went to jail, and I was completely out of control, I OD'd with my little sister. CPS came back in the picture. So I let my kids live with another sister of mine. And I let my apartment go and decided I was going to check into rehab because I was getting out of hand again. So I check into rehab. At this time, I had quite a bit of abuse from my ex. He had knocked one of my teeth out, and my smile was it was really pretty, but my teeth were all messed up from the drugs, and, I would throw up every day because that was the high that I strove for, and I had periodontal disease, so, he ended up knocking one of my front teeth out, and when I went to the dentist, they couldn't fix it, and they're like, your teeth are deteriorating anyway, so if we did a partial, it would be super painful because your teeth just aren't strong, and honestly, you'd be better off just getting them all pulled right now because you're going to have to get them pulled eventually anyway, and just getting a denture. So when I was in rehab, I went and got 16 teeth pulled, and of course, I wasn't allowed any narcotics, rightfully so. And after I got those teeth pulled, I remember getting back to rehab, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and I could not hide behind my appearance any longer. I finally had to look at myself for who I was. The outsides finally matched who I was on the inside, and I hated it. I could not look at it. So I left rehab, and 20 minutes later, I was high. I got my kids back because CPS had, gracefully bowed out when I decided to go into inpatient. And I went to my mother's house, which is never a good place for me to be. Me and my mom are just toxic for one another. We didn't, after the age of 12, I didn't have a mother-daughter relationship with her anymore. It was more of a using friendship. And there's just been a lot of damage there. So anytime I go to my mother's, it's never a good thing. So I go to her house, and I keep relapsing, of course, and I can't stay sober, and I just get this overwhelming feeling one day if you do not stop, you are going to die. You're not getting a third chance. You OD a third time, and you're gone. And then what's going to happen to your children? Who's going to raise them? What are they going to be around? And my mom was just really, I don't know, she's just not, she don't behave like a grandmother should behave. If my kids would get a toy out, she'd be like, oh, they need to clean that up, and they'd have it out for 5 minutes, And, basically she wanted him to sit there and shut up all day. And I have a 2 and a 6-year-old. That's just not reality. And, she would smoke her pot, and the kids would be running around playing, and she'd be like, you need to make them be quiet because they're ruining my vibe. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like she had got my sister taken by CPS. The only reason I wasn't taken is because I was 18. And I'm looking at all the matchups of our life, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be 44 and be like her and be miserable. She's just miserable. And that night, everyone was asleep, and I put my earbuds in because music is my therapy. And I had recently found a Christian rapper named NF, and he had this song called Wake Up. And I just had it on repeat, and I was bawling my eyes out. I'm like face down on the floor, just bawling. And I'm like, God, please help me. Please get me out of here. I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die, and I know you're telling me I'm going to if I don't reach for help. And I got this overwhelming sensation, like, get a hold of Eve's angels. And I didn't know why I was getting a hold of them, but I followed orders. And so I sent them an email, and a couple hours later, the director called me. And I'm telling her a little bit of my story, and then the lady that wrote the book got on the phone, and she was like, so I'm hearing your story, and I read your email, and she's like, I'm just not sure what you're asking of us. And I was like, honestly, I don't know either. I just know God told me to get a hold of you. So here I am. And she was like, what are you willing to do for your salvation and for your recovery? And I was like, whatever is necessary, like any lengths. And she was like, well, do you want to leave state? And she was like, I was still talking with the kid's dad at the time. She said, I want you to get a hold of him and make sure that he's okay with it. And I want you to pray about it. And we're going to pray before I get off the phone. And you call me back in 2 hours and let me know what you decide. So I do what she asked. And before I even got off the phone, I knew I was supposed to go to that place. And I called the kid's dad, and he was real supportive. And I called her back within an hour, and I'm like, I need this. I'm supposed to do this. Like, even in my darkest days, anytime I would get messed up, like, that book popped into my head. Like, I don't know why, but I need to do this. And so she had me on a Greyhound, and I left state 5 days later. And when I got on the Greyhound, I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace. And I got there, and it was amazing. I just felt so serene once I got on that property. And when I was there, I only got to stay there for like a month and a half because, of course, addict behaviors started coming out, and they wanted to get me more help, which I appreciate everything that the organization has done for me. And I am grateful for the time I got to spend there, because while I was there, I got to know God. I got to know the Word. I got to know how beautiful and gracious and forgiving He is and what He has done for me. And I needed that to heal. I needed to know that I was worth saving, and I needed to know that He had never given up on me because everyone else had. So I ended up going to another place in Toledo with my children, and it was a recovery program, and it was really nice, and they taught me a lot of structure, and God was just with me the whole time. Like, I felt Him pulling on me the whole time, and I would, like, read devotions to the girls, and some people would be having hard times, and I had people listening to scripture with me that before that didn't want anything to do with God, and I was just, He was using me in that place, and it felt so good. I felt like I was fulfilling my purpose. Like, I truly think that I am meant to work with broken women and minister to them and just share my testimony and share how beautiful and gracious He is and what His love has done for me and how I am now. And it's beautiful. When I'm working with a broken woman and I am sharing the love of Christ with them, it is better than, it's like the feeling I'm getting right now as I'm making this video and talking about Him. And it's better than any high I've ever experienced. That's what I was trying to fill all those years with all those drugs, this hole, this void in my heart. And that's all I had to do. I just had to find God, and it's full now. I don't ever have to go back to being that empty, worthless person ever again. Like, hallelujah, Jesus Christ has saved me. Me, a broke down heroin addict that sold her body for drugs, money, did you dirty for whatever. Like, I'll sell your last $20 out of your pocket. But I'm not that person anymore, thanks to his grace. Like, I'm not. I couldn't even fathom doing something like that now. I'm a caring, kind person who reaches out to people, and I ask how you're doing, and I genuinely give it. I genuinely care. And none of this would be possible without his grace, because who I am today is not who I was before, and that's only something God can do. I just encourage you that if you are going through addiction, or if you are broken and you've been battered and you just got people putting you down all the time, like, reach for him. He will help you. He will give you a way out if you listen. He's been so amazing to me. Just reach out for that. I am now 6 months clean. I am still in a transitional housing program. I should have my own place in a month and a half. But this is the most awesome I've ever felt since I was a child. And I have my kids with me. I'm still alive. I still have my babies, and I got Jesus. And I feel wonderful. And I just hope and pray that somebody gets something out of this message. Somebody finds peace. Somebody reaches out to him and just, God, I can't do this anymore. Please help me. I pray someone gets something from this. And just don't give up. You can do this. You can get clean. You can get away from that abusive man. You know, you can fight whatever demon you are fighting with God's help. And I love all of you. And yeah, have a good day, everyone.